All right.
Welcome to our podcast today. Ask Aaron and Ask EJ. This is Coach Eric Johnson, the brand.
This is Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. EJ, today's subject. Um, Something that might be a little fun, but still has a little serious note to it.
Hmm.
Me, I'm not a big advocate of social media and especially social media training. And so
Right?
something just kind of been looking at some social media. I kind of go in ways where I just don't look at anything, and then other times I get caught down the rabbit hole. And something just struck me
Mm,
this week. Now, all of a sudden, speed is in vogue, So now you get inundated with all these newfound speed gurus out there.
right.
As far as concerned, speed's never been out of fashion, not for athletes,
Absolutely.
But with that, I'm starting to see all of these kind of like stuff that's just overdone. You know, it's they're taking a simple movement and they're just into something that's like, what are you doing? Why don't you just tell your kid to put their foot down here versus
Right.
going through all these machinations and all these things to do just something very simple and straightforward.
Right.
You know, I see it in baseball. Do you really need to strap, three or four bands onto your body to get you to rotate or get hip separation? Do you need to balance on a Bosu ball and swing a bat to work on ground contact, ensuring ground contact force?
Right.
In the sprinting, I'm seeing drills that look like they're doing can dances and MC Hammer videos now. It's just like I know
Oh,
what it is. I mean, guys are trying to be different and they're trying to sell something, but it's just like the general public doesn't always know the difference. And to me, some of that stuff can be dangerous, especially for younger athletes and beginning athletes who don't really know all that stuff. Like I saw this one, I understand what the guy's going for, where he wants everything done fast. You got to train fast to be fast. But to me, if those movements are garbage, I don't know if that really serves the athlete well. That has to be balanced with proper technique.
right.
Even if it's not during that drill, at least in some proximity of that drill.
Right.
Um, Otherwise, you can hurt an athlete. And the thing is, a lot of this stuff gets lost in the translation when you're just seeing one moment in time in a video, and that's all you get, and you don't get any context. And so now you got an athlete, you got your 12-year-old out there trying to do some, drill over running over sticks. They don't really know the proper spacing and all this stuff. And next thing you know, they trip and, they hurt themselves. So today's topic, I guess if we give it a title would be, is your training performative or performance based? So in other words, are you trying to get a little too cute with your exercises versus just remembering, hey, where am I going? What there should be a straight line from what I'm doing into what it should look like and that what that should result should look like, if you
Right.
understand what I mean.
Yes, sir.
Because everyone will sell you anything you want if you ask for it. And it just seems like there's just becoming there's this race to trying to be unique and
Absolutely.
different with trainers now that I don't know. Again, maybe I'm just at the point where it's a generational thing or it just it doesn't sit that well with me
Oh man.
because you're just moving so far away from the basics.
Boy, you said something really important right there. We're moving far away from the basics. And I see it all the time in baseball, like the fundamentals, catch, throw,
Yes.
run, hit, hit with power, okay? Have some sort of mentality or baseball IQ, all right? And play defense. Like I see this now and I get what you're saying about training. Kids don't know how to play catch anymore and how to throw properly. Those are things you learn at an early age of 8, even 7, 8, 9, because you're training the athlete correctly. Because once you form a bad habit, then you got to go back and reinvent stuff. That's why I think this is happening, Aaron. This is
Yeah,
why you see swinging off a ball
yeah,
or doing this can running or MC Hammer stuff
yeah.
because the athleticism and the teaching of the fundamental is off. It's
Right.
not being taught right. And no one wants to teach the fundamentals and basics anymore. But you and I do. I'm going to say that right now in front of everyone. We do. And I'll tell you why. Because we know that those basic fundamentals are your base and that gets you to where you need to in the future. And you said it earlier, it's a process, a straight line, follow that line, step by step process, put the work in, put the hard work in, work with a purpose, have a plan, and move forward. And that's why I think we see this. That's my 2 cents, just to get us started, Aaron. My
Yeah,
2 cents about, is your training performance based or is it performative?
yeah,
Does it look good? Like everybody's got their Instagram video or their YouTube or their thing they send out on contact, constant contact about look this new greatest thing. I've got this but your kid can't move correctly.
right.
It goes back to a podcast we had years ago about taking away PE in school. Or
Hmm.
you talk about that street kid, that
Yeah,
kid, that playground kid that goes out and plays on the playground. All that's gone now. So I think that goes down this line of thinking that you and I are discussing today.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny you mentioned what I call the neighborhood kid, and
Right.
it's kind of how we grew up and developed our movement skills and our athleticism. And I think that's where imagination has its place. I don't think imagination has its place when you're going to pay somebody and now they're starting to make up exercises just to kind of keep you entertained or for it to look good or you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do
And
know what
and
you're saying.
so that's kind of I don't know how do we help educate parents to be able to see the difference because that's what I'm kind of more concerned about
Yeah.
is how do you weed through all that crap out there and just get to the meat and potatoes of what you need to do, or at least make sure that's being addressed before
Yeah.
you move on to that other stuff. Because I see where there some of that stuff can be of value, but to be honest with you, a lot of that stuff isn't of value until you've got a lot of time in.
Time in. Right.
So, for instance, like I see these little clips of basketball trainers, and they're
Mhm.
doing all of these kind of like change of direction moves and things like that, where you're I don't know, you're stopping and then you're twisting and then you're planting the other foot and then you're jumping
Yeah.
forward and then you got one, what you know, whatever. But all these kind of combinations and they're doing it with these older athletes. And I'm like, okay, well, there could be a place for that. But that's with an athlete that has a lot of time in. You know what I'm saying? As an
Yes.
athlete, physically, has the strength, the coordination, endurance, all of those built up. If you're a 10-year-old and you're looking at that and you're trying to replicate that, and you can't even do a proper lunge or a squat, or you don't have the proper range of motion in your ankles, what do you think is likely to happen to them?
Injury.
Yeah. And,
Injury.
and and so to me, sometimes I think that's a little bit of, I mean, obviously, again, everything is about getting eyeballs, so I get it.
Right. Right.
But to me, that's a little, what do you want to call it? Oh,
Pretentious.
pretentious, not pretentious, but it's not thinking also about the scope of who you're reaching. Where's your responsibility when you're putting some of these things out, knowing that it's going to be consumed by the general public without some kind of buyer beware or, hey, you know what? This is something I do with, I mean, in other words, there's no kind of Surgeon General message that says, hey,
Right.
this is an exercise that should be reserved for X type of athlete.
Right. Correct. Correct.
So now you're putting it in context
Hmm.
for people. And then maybe that's when you offer, hey, this type of movement should be preceded with learning these two types of movements.
Right.
And I know that's time consuming and things like that, but I just think as trainers, we have a duty and responsibility not just to put out stuff that is entertaining, that's performative.
Right. Right.
So again, maybe that's just again the generation gap between me and trainers nowadays. But I just feel that we all have a responsibility, not if you're going to provide content that's also responsible.
Can't agree with you enough. Um, Everybody's chasing the almighty dollar at the end of the day, and like, how can I separate myself from this person, and
Exactly.
how is mine different than that person? Well, unfortunately, in sports, there are fundamental base things that happen,
Yeah.
and guys become elite because they're elite athletically gifted.
Hmm.
People forget that.
Yeah.
People forget that. You can acquire greatness to a certain extent. If
Right.
you have an athlete that is 6 feet, 185, and it can really, really run
Hmm.
and play the game correctly and do stuff versus a guy that's 5'3",
Yeah.
145 pounds,
Right.
that athleticism may be just a little bit different.
Yeah.
All things equal, all
Right.
things equal. They do the skills, but one has more mass and power and speed,
Right.
to do things a little bit more powerful. So that guy is going to have a little bit better power numbers or extra base numbers, all
Right.
relative. Okay.
Right.
So don't think that every athlete, because they're of size or structure or whatsoever, are going to get to that elite status. People don't get there to being really efficient, really good at what they do, Aaron,
Mhm.
unless they one work very hard to
Right.
start mastering, keyword, mastering their
Yes.
craft,
Yeah.
not making it perfect. You don't
Yeah.
perfect your craft. You master it and you adjust to find out how you adapt to all these situations when you're performing. And it's a mastery of something, not a perfection. Like I'm gonna make this perfect. Nothing's perfect in sports.
Right.
There isn't. So I think if us as trainers, I think we should have a ethical standard that
Right.
that's in our conscious, and we understand that this is right and this is wrong for certain people and
Right.
this is right for certain people. If we can do that, and I think that's what makes your pedigree
Hmm.
as a trainer stand out. When you can say this is not for you yet,
Yeah.
maybe if you develop these things and here are the two things you need to get better at, then we can move you along down this road.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what I think. That's how I kind of feel about it today, Aaron. I think you said something valuable. I think we have some sort of ethical standard behind that, and we want everybody, hopefully, that has a conscience about helping young athletes progress, do the same.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have to say on the subject. Didn't think it'd take too long, but again, people, are buyer beware,
Right.
viewer beware of just some of these things that may not be, they may look great and they may look cool, but may not be for you.
Right. And hey, out there, if you like what we have to say, don't forget to hit that like button on Spotify, YouTube, and all our social media out there. Please hit likes. If you have any conversations you'd like to have with us, hey, hit us up. We'd like to hear from you. With that said, this Coach EJ, the brand.
And this is Coach Aaron, the source. We'll see you.